was a very sort of sudden flick of a switch, that everything suddenly became very two-dimensional. Things felt really alien and threatening.
It's a condition most GPs have never heard of, but 1 in 100 people are thought to have depersonalization disorder.
Everything seems unreal, like there's a fog between what you see and what your brain interprets.
The mental health condition leaves people feeling disconnected from their own body and the world around them.
And suddenly your flat will suddenly feel like a film set, and my possessions feel like props.
Medical professionals are failing to diagnose it, and treatment can take years, even decades, to find.
Of my GP colleagues, I would be very surprised if any of them had heard of depersonalization disorder.
Experts say action needs to be taken, but the question is whether it will come anytime soon.
I felt confused, I felt alien.
Sarah's an actress. Since university, she's had several chronic episodes of depersonalization disorder, a mental health condition that makes the world seem unfamiliar and unreal. It's often triggered by moments of acute stress or anxiety. For Sarah, it started while studying for her final exams.
I've described it since as a feeling of having emotionally flatlined, so everything suddenly became very two-dimensional. Things felt really alien and threatening. It felt like two parts of me had sort of separated. So my physical being in the world and my mind. And suddenly your flat or somewhere that is very, very familiar to you will suddenly feel like a film set, and my possessions feel like props.
1 in 100 people, more than 600,000 in the UK, are estimated to be living with the condition, known in full as Depersonalization Derealization Disorder. It can start at any time, but usually in adolescence or early adulthood. It's believed to start as a defence mechanism, helping people to cope during a period of severe anxiety or trauma by switching off reality. It can also be triggered by drug use, such as cannabis or ecstasy. But while in many people the symptoms will pass, in others they can remain for decades if untreated. Those with the condition report a sense of detachment from the world and self, seeing the world as if through a haze or fog, the world appearing in 2D as if objects are flat like in a cartoon, watching themselves as if from afar in an out-of-body experience, feeling detached from their own body parts, and an emotional numbing.
Relationships you know you value deeply suddenly lose their essential quality. You know that you love your family, but you sort of know it academically rather than feeling it in the normal way.
People ask you if you love them, if how you feel, and you can't say I love you if you're emotionally blunt.
Daniel Belle lives in Chatham in Kent, where he cares for his dad. He developed depersonalization disorder 4 years ago as a result of anxiety, and it's never gone away. Like many others, he now sees the world in 2D, as Sarah has done previously.
I was reading a book, I was holding the book, and suddenly my hands holding the book looked like a picture of a pair of hands holding a book. So I felt this separation between the physical world and my perception of it.
It's literally like you're watching a cartoon, is the only way I can explain it. And everything just compresses and flat. You still know that if you look up the road, there's a house this side, that's past that point, because your brain tells you, but what you physically see is flat and lifeless.
On occasion, Daniel has out-of-body experiences too.
I'd be working on my bike and I had the feeling that I was like beside myself, looking at myself, and it was horrible. It petrified me. It was one of the most disturbing things I'd ever experienced.
Daniel says his mental health has been made worse by the failure of successive medical professionals to diagnose him correctly.
Doctors, they would say I was just depressed. I was given antidepressants like I was going out of fashion. I'd have one lot, it wouldn't work. I'd try another lot, that wouldn't work. And then that's the cycle that I was going through. And I'd sit down and I'd talk to my dad, and I was in tears, and for days and weeks I'd be crying to him. I'd be begging my dad to get help, but he can't do any more than what the doctors do. If they're saying you're just depressed and you need to take this or that, then he's helpless. He was absolutely helpless, but I felt he was the only person I could turn to. In the end, my own father was the only person I felt that I could get help from.
He says the situation only began to progress when he attempted suicide.
I tried to take my own life, and it wasn't until that happened that I was referred to secondary care. If I hadn't been referred to secondary care, I don't think I would ever have got the help I need. Me and my counsellor, we pretty much Googled what my symptoms were, and she come up to me one day and said, is that what's wrong with you? And I was like, yeah, to a T, that's what's wrong with me.
Simon, whose name we changed, also lives with the disorder. He's a newly qualified GP and says very few of his colleagues will have heard of the condition. Past studies have suggested people wait an average of 8 to 12 years for a successful diagnosis. This is despite the condition having been medically recognised for decades and being as widespread as conditions such as OCD and schizophrenia.
I think of my GP colleagues, I would be very surprised if any of them had heard of depersonalization disorder. I imagine there's going to be many people suffering from the condition who will have had a late diagnosis and worsening of the symptoms because of the fact that they're not diagnosed or treated at an early stage. There was nothing in my training at all about depersonalization disorder. I never came across it both during my training as a GP or in my training at medical school. If you compare this to disorders such as OCD and bipolar disorder, if it has the same prevalence, then it should therefore have the same coverage.
The Royal College of GPs says mental health is a key part of its curriculum and that training on complex mental health problems is being developed. The Royal College of Psychiatrists says knowledge of the condition must be improved. Simon says before he developed the condition himself, he wrongly diagnosed at least 2 of his own patients.
Unfortunately, due to my lack of awareness of the condition, I wasn't able to make a diagnosis. Therefore, those 2 patients aren't currently treated, to the best of my knowledge, for depersonalization disorder.
It's very frightening to be insisting, certainly to a professional, that something's not right, something's gone wrong in your head, and for people to just be baffled. You know, that's frightening in itself. The GPs should know the word depersonalisation, and I think certain presenting factors need to be recognised. If someone goes to the GP and they describe a feeling of unreality, that they don't feel real, that things don't feel real, things feel dreamlike, they feel detached. These should be sort of like key words that people are picking up on.
How many medical professionals have you seen who haven't known about the condition?
Oh my word. I've seen possibly up to 20 people over the years who haven't known what I was talking about. Community psychiatric nurses, GPs, therapists, private therapists, counsellors. They haven't heard of it. It's not part of their training, it's not part of their vocabulary.
Sarah eventually got a correct diagnosis, but only by looking up the condition herself. And this was only part of the issue. There's only one specialist clinic in all of the UK, and access to it on the NHS requires funding from your local clinical commissioning group. Even with a diagnosis, and having been treated previously for the same condition, Sarah's latest attempt to find help became a struggle. The process had taken over a year when she neared crisis point.
A year is an enormously long time to wait, and the referral process is really, really onerous and stressful in itself. I had to prove there wasn't something else wrong with me. The local team have to be absolutely sure that you don't have something else wrong with you, that you're not self-diagnosing. I was having panic attacks quite regularly. I was really, really scared. I presented at A&E once because I felt like I was in crisis. I couldn't really cope with the feeling. So it's that bad. When it's bad, it's really bad. It's so different to how you would be treated if you were presenting with a physical condition that caused you to suffer profoundly. You wouldn't wait this long.
Definitely if people are not having treatment.
Consultant clinical psychologist Dr. Elaine Hunter runs the only specialist clinic in the UK. It has limited resources and sees fewer than 80 patients a year. One of Dr. Hunter's concerns is the clinic has been designated an adult-only service, meaning she's unable to treat under 18s.
There's no provision of specialist services for adolescents with depersonalisation, derealization disorder, which is really a big problem. And we sometimes get very distressed and upset parents who have a 15-year-old that has started to develop these symptoms, is terrified, don't know what to do. They may be engaged in local services, but they feel that the local services maybe don't understand the problem or aren't specialised enough. And there's nothing very much that we can do for that period of time.
But as a clinic, you're effectively having to turn people away who are under 18.
Yes.
Dr. Hunter hopes in time services will become available for children and young people. She says another improvement would be to ensure care is available to all patients locally.
One of the things that could be really helpful is to have each of the mental health trusts around the country to have 1 or 2 members of staff that are dedicated depersonalisation, derealization leads.
Dr. Hunter's also developed a form of the talking therapy CBT that's specifically designed for depersonalization disorder. She believes with training, medical professionals already using CBT will be able to adapt their knowledge to treat this condition too. Today she's meeting Sarah Ashley, one of her patients who's seen a huge improvement in her mental health.
I'd been doctor shopping, I was trying to find a magic cure, a magic pill. I was very anti-CBT, didn't think it was ever going to work for me, but for me it's made a huge, huge difference. My voice would feel like it's not coming from me, like it's robotic or it's coming from somewhere else. I'd look down at parts of my body or my hands and they would feel like they're not mine. Yes. I'd look in the mirror and it would be like, obviously I know it's me, but it would be like looking at a photo of someone else.
Yes.
I was on like a hamster wheel of horribleness. It was just awful. Couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I think when I first came to see you, actually, I was about 6.5 stone from all the anxiety from it. Whereas now I'm kind of, yeah, I do get a bit of depersonalisation and I do get anxiety, but I can totally deal with it really quickly. You know, I might have a bad day and then the next day I've rationalised everything in my mind and I'm fine and I carry on.
Recently, it's, you know, when you've started this new job and also trying to sell a house, and were telling me about, you know, how difficult and stressful those events were for you. And then when we came to talk about how that impacted on the depersonalisation, you kind of went, oh, well, I haven't really had it.
Yeah.
And we both really had a moment of kind of thinking, oh, okay, that sounds pretty good.
Treatment then is available, but currently limited in scope and difficult to access. After trying to take his own life, it was a further 2 years before Daniel finally had access to specialist care. Now he does. He says he's optimistic he can get better.
I am hopeful now. Now that I'm getting the correct treatment, I won't let this stop me doing what I want to do.